Come back here, Vivian! Vivian, stop!
Let go of me!
There are moments in life that look harmless while they're happening. A party, a smile, a phone number, and you only realize later you were standing at the beginning of something that would destroy everything. Because the night it started was supposed to be a celebration, a private billionaire party, not the kind you see online. This was the kind of party where the entrance gate looked like a government building, where the security didn't just check your name, they checked your face, where every guest inside either owned something important or was trying to. The room was quiet luxury, soft jazz, dim lights, champagne that cost more than a normal person's rent, and men in suits who could move markets with one phone call. Then the doors opened, and two men walked in like they owned the air. Damian Vale, cold, calculated, always in control, the kind of billionaire who didn't smile for people because he didn't need to. Then came his best friend, Ethan Blackwell, charming, loud, dangerous, the kind of billionaire who made everyone laugh, but made you feel like you were one wrong sentence away from being destroyed. They were the richest men in that room, and they knew it. 10 years of friendship, 10 years of winning, and not once had anything ever come between them. Until her. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Vivian Monroe, and she didn't walk into that party like she wanted attention. She walked in like she belonged there. Elegant, calm, classy, long hair falling in soft waves. A modest designer dress, high neckline, long sleeves, tailored perfectly. No skin, no desperation, no loud jewelry, just quiet beauty. The kind that makes powerful men pause. Damian noticed her first, not because he was desperate, but because Damian had a habit of noticing what other men missed. Vivian wasn't hunting. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to be chosen. She was simply present, and that made her dangerous. Ethan noticed too, and for the first time all night, Ethan stopped smiling. Damian walked toward her with the calm confidence of a man who had never been rejected. Vivian saw him coming and didn't flinch. She didn't act impressed. She didn't act nervous. She simply waited. Damian spoke first. A simple question. Vivian answered softly. And within minutes, it felt like they weren't at a party anymore. It felt like the room had blurred around them. Damian asked her where she was from, what she did, why she was there. Vivian answered just enough to seem honest, without giving too much away. And Damian liked that, because Damian hated women who tried too hard. Then Damian did something he rarely did. He asked for her number, not with charm, not with jokes, just direct. Let me take you to dinner. Vivian paused. Just a moment. Not hesitation. Consideration. Then she nodded. Okay. Damian handed her his phone. Vivian typed her number in. And when she handed it back, Damian looked at the screen like it mattered more than the entire party. Vivian smiled politely, then disappeared into the crowd like she'd never been there. Damian returned to Ethan, and Ethan was watching him. Damian's voice stayed calm. She's interesting. Ethan smirked. Of course she is. Damian set his phone down on the table for a second. Just a second. And Ethan, casually, picked it up like he was checking the time. His thumb moved. Fast. Silent. He opened the contact, copied the number, sent it to himself, and placed the phone back exactly where it was. No drama. No comment. No warning. Damian didn't notice. Because Damian trusted Ethan. And Ethan knew that. Later that night, Vivian got home and placed her purse down. Her phone lit up. A message from Damian. Then seconds later, another message came in. From a number she didn't recognize. Vivian stared at the screen. Her face stayed calm. Then she smiled softly and typed, "Hello." Vivian Monroe stared at her phone for a long moment. Not because she was confused, because she was deciding. The first message was simple. From Damian. Clean. Direct. Exactly like him. It's Damian. I'm glad you made it home. Dinner tomorrow. Vivian read it twice. Then the second message came in. A number she didn't recognize. No name. No introduction. Just one sentence. You looked beautiful tonight. I want to see you again. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. Not suspicious. Just curious. Because in Vivian's world, messages like that weren't rare. Men always wanted something. But what caught her attention wasn't the compliment. It was the confidence. Whoever this was, he didn't sound like a random guy from the party. He sounded like someone who was used to being obeyed. Vivian placed her phone down and walked into her bedroom. She removed her earrings slowly, unpinned her hair, and stood in front of the mirror for a moment. She looked calm, collected, like she wasn't thinking about two billionaires, like she wasn't standing at the edge of something dangerous. Then she picked her phone back up. She replied to Damian first. "Tomorrow works." Then she replied to the unknown number. "Who is this?" The response came instantly. "Someone you met tonight." Vivian paused, then typed. "That doesn't narrow it down." A few seconds passed. Then, "You don't need to know my name yet. Just be ready Friday." Vivian stared at the screen. She should have said no. Most women would have said no. But Vivian didn't. Because there was something about that message that felt controlled. Like the sender wasn't asking. He was claiming a space in her week. Vivian typed one word. "Okay." The next day, Damian arrived for dinner exactly on time. Not early. Not late. Damian didn't believe in cute. Damian believed in precision. He picked Vivian up himself. No driver. No security walking beside him. Just Damian in a black luxury car, calm and quiet, like he didn't need witnesses to prove he was powerful. Vivian stepped into the passenger seat wearing a cream-colored coat over a modest dress. Hair down, makeup soft, elegant. Damian glanced at her once, then looked back at the road. "You look good." Vivian smiled politely. "Thank you." Damian nodded. "I don't usually do this." Vivian blinked. "Do what?" Damian's voice stayed flat. "Pursue." Vivian's smile softened slightly. "Then why are you doing it now?" Damian didn't answer immediately. Then he said something simple. Something honest. "Because you feel different." Dinner was quiet luxury. A private room. No loud crowd. No phones on the table. Damian asked questions. Vivian answered softly. She laughed at the right moments. She listened. She didn't overshare. And Damian liked that. Because Vivian didn't act like she was trying to win him. She acted like she was simply being herself. And for Damian, that was rare. At the end of the night, Damian walked her to her door. Vivian turned the key, then paused. Damian spoke quietly. "Friday, I want to see you again." Vivian looked up at him. "Friday?" Damian nodded. "Yes." Vivian held his gaze for a second, then smiled softly. "Okay." Damian leaned in and kissed her cheek. Not desperate, not rushed, controlled. Then he walked away. The moment Vivian stepped inside, she locked the door. She leaned against it for a second. Then her phone lit up again. The unknown number. "Tomorrow, 9 p.m., I'm picking you up." Vivian stared at the message. Because tomorrow wasn't Friday. Tomorrow was Thursday. Meaning this mystery man was trying to take a night that Damian already thought belonged to him. Vivian should have stopped it. She should have chosen. But Vivian didn't choose. Not yet. Instead, she typed back. "Where?" And the reply came back instantly. "You'll see." Vivian stared at the screen, then slowly exhaled, and whispered to herself, "This is getting complicated." Vivian placed her phone down, and on the screen, the unknown number typed one more message. One sentence. One warning. "Don't tell anyone about me." Thursday night came faster than Vivian expected, and for the first time in days, she found herself standing in front of her closet, not choosing what she liked, but choosing what would work. Because Damian liked elegance. Damian liked modest. Damian liked a woman who looked untouchable. But whoever this other man was, he liked control, and Vivian could feel it in every message. So she chose something in the middle. A sleek, long-sleeve black dress. High neckline. Classy. No skin. But fitted enough to remind a man she was a woman. Then she pinned her hair back halfway, leaving soft waves down her back. And when she looked in the mirror, she looked like trouble wrapped in silk. At exactly 9 p.m., a black luxury car pulled up outside her building. Not Damian's car. Different. The windows were darker. The engine quieter. The kind of car that didn't want to be seen. Vivian stepped outside slowly. The back door opened. A man inside spoke before she could see his face. "Get in." His voice was smooth. Confident. Vivian hesitated for half a second. Not because she was scared. Because she wanted to see what kind of man gave orders like that. Then she slid into the car. The door closed. And only then did the interior light reveal him. Ethan Blackwell. Vivian's eyes widened slightly. Not in shock. In recognition. Because now everything made sense. The confidence. The control. The way the texts felt like commands. Ethan leaned back, smiling like he'd already won. "You look good." Vivian forced her expression to stay calm. "You're the one who texted me." Ethan's smile deepened. "Yes." Vivian's voice stayed soft. "Why didn't you say it was you?" Ethan shrugged casually. Because I didn't want you overthinking. Vivian stared at him. Or because you didn't want your friend knowing. Ethan's smile paused. Just for a second. Then he laughed. Damian doesn't own you. Vivian didn't respond. She looked out the window instead. And Ethan watched her closely. Because Vivian didn't react the way most women would. Most women would have panicked. Most women would have asked questions. Most women would have jumped out of the car. Vivian didn't. Vivian sat there calmly like this was just another part of her week. And that calmness made Ethan want her more. Ethan didn't take her to a normal restaurant. He took her to a place so private it didn't have a sign. No reservation desk. No menu outside. Just a quiet entrance and a man waiting like he already knew Ethan was coming. Inside, the lighting was dim. Blue-tinted. Soft. Expensive. The room felt like a secret. Vivian sat across from Ethan while a waiter poured wine without asking. Ethan watched her the entire time. Not like Damian. Damian watched like a man deciding. Ethan watched like a man hungry. Halfway through dinner, Ethan leaned forward. So tell me. Vivian blinked. Tell you what. Ethan's voice lowered. Why you came? Vivian smiled softly. You invited me. Ethan chuckled. No. You could have said no. Vivian held his gaze. I didn't want to. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Why? Vivian paused. Just long enough to feel honest. Then she said, because you're interesting. Ethan smiled like he'd been waiting for that. By the end of the night, Ethan walked her back to the car. Before she stepped in, Ethan touched her wrist gently. Don't tell Damian. Vivian looked up at him. Why? Ethan's smile stayed in place. But his eyes hardened. Because I don't share. Vivian stared at him for a moment. Then she nodded softly. Okay. When Vivian got home, her phone buzzed. Damian. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow. Vivian stared at the message. Then typed back. Good night. Vivian placed her phone down. Walked to her bedroom. Removed her earrings. Removed her heels. And sat on the edge of the bed quietly. For the first time since the party. She looked like she was thinking hard. Not guilty. Not scared. Just calculating. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. From Ethan. You're mine now. Vivian stared at the screen. And after a long pause, she typed back. We'll see. By Friday morning, Vivian Monroe had done something most women wouldn't dare. She had accepted dinner from Damian Vale. And a secret night out from Ethan Blackwell. Without either man knowing. And somehow, she still looked like the innocent one. That was the scary part. Vivian didn't look like a liar. She looked like a woman men wanted to protect. Damian texted her early. Tonight. 8 p.m., I'll pick you up. Vivian replied. Okay. Ethan texted her minutes later. Tonight. 10 p.m., don't be late. Vivian stared at that message longer. Not because she was afraid. Because Ethan's tone was changing. Damian invited. Ethan demanded. Vivian typed back. I'll be there. That night, Damian arrived first. He stepped out of his car in a tailored suit, calm and sharp, like the world was already under control. Vivian walked out of her building wearing a soft blue dress and a long coat. Hair down. Makeup minimal. Elegant. Damian's eyes moved over her slowly. You look perfect. Vivian smiled softly. Thank you. Damian opened the door for her himself. And the fact that he did it made it feel personal. Like he wasn't just wealthy. He was deliberate. Dinner with Damian felt safe. Not boring. Safe. Private table. Low voices. Damian asked questions like he was trying to learn her, not impress her. Vivian answered carefully, giving him enough to feel close, but not enough to see everything. Damian liked her calmness. He liked her manners. He liked the way she didn't act hungry for money. And that made Damian do something dangerous. He started to imagine her staying. Not for a night. For real. After dinner, Damian didn't rush her home. He drove her through the city slowly. No music. Just quiet. Vivian looked out the window. Damian glanced at her. What are you thinking about? Vivian smiled gently. This feels unreal. Damian's voice was low. It's real. Vivian turned her head toward him. How do you know? Damian didn't hesitate. Because I don't waste time. When Damian dropped her off, he didn't kiss her. He didn't touch her. He simply leaned in and whispered, I want you to trust me. Vivian blinked, then nodded softly. Okay. Damian watched her walk inside. And as she disappeared, Damian sat in his car for a long moment. Because Damian Vale wasn't used to wanting. He was used to taking. Inside her apartment, Vivian didn't relax. She didn't throw her shoes off like she was done. She walked straight to her closet. Changed her dress. Changed her coat. changed her perfume. Not dramatically, just efficiently, like she had done it before. Then she checked her phone. Ethan, car is downstairs. Vivian exhaled once, then walked out. Ethan's car was waiting, but Ethan wasn't smiling this time. The moment Vivian got in, his eyes scanned her. Not her face, her outfit, her hair, like he was checking for something. Vivian smiled softly. Hi. Ethan's voice was calm. Too calm. You're late. Vivian blinked. It's 10:02. Ethan stared at her, then smiled again. Don't do that again. Vivian's smile didn't fade. Okay. But this time, her voice sounded less soft, more careful. Ethan took her somewhere different. Not a restaurant. A private lounge. Music low. Lights darker. The kind of place where people don't ask names. They ask what you want. Ethan sat close to Vivian. Too close. His arm behind her chair. His knee brushing hers. And Vivian didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either. She stayed perfectly balanced. Like she knew exactly how to keep a man hungry. Ethan leaned toward her. So are you mine now? Vivian turned her head slightly. I'm not anyone's. Ethan smiled, but his eyes hardened. You will be. Vivian held his gaze. That sounds like a threat. Ethan chuckled softly. No. Vivian whispered. Then what is it? Ethan leaned in closer. A promise. Later, when Ethan dropped her off, he grabbed her wrist gently. Not painful, but firm. Don't lie to me. Vivian blinked. About what? Ethan's voice dropped. Anything. Vivian smiled softly. I won't. Ethan watched her for a long moment. Then let go. Vivian walked into her building. And for the first time, she didn't look calm. She looked like she was holding something back. Something heavy. Something dangerous. When Vivian got into her apartment, she checked her phone again. A message from Damian. I'm thinking about you. Then another message. From Ethan. I'm watching you. Vivian stared at both. And for the first time, Vivian didn't reply immediately. By the next week, Vivian Monroe wasn't just dating two men. She was living in two worlds. And neither world knew the other existed. Damian's world was quiet power. Private rooms. Soft voices. Control. Ethan's world was loud luxury. VIP lounges. Fast cars. Possession. And Vivian? Vivian moved between both like she was born to do it. Damian called her Monday. Not text. Call. That alone told Vivian something. Damian didn't call women unless he meant it. Vivian answered on the second ring. Hi. Damian's voice was calm. Lunch. Today. Vivian smiled softly. Okay. Damian paused, then said, We're something simple. Vivian blinked. Simple. Damian replied. I don't like attention on you. Vivian's smile stayed polite. Okay. But the moment she hung up, Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. Not angry, just noting it. Lunch with Damian was quiet, private, and Damian looked at her like he was studying her, like he wanted to understand her past, her habits, her weaknesses. Because Damian didn't fall for women, Damian assessed them, and Vivian was passing every test. Later that night, Ethan texted. Dinner. 9 p.m. Vivian replied. Okay. Ethan sent another message immediately. Wear red. Vivian stared at it. Because Damian told her not to wear anything attention-grabbing, and Ethan was telling her to do the opposite. Vivian opened her closet, and without hesitation, she chose red. That night, Ethan's eyes lit up when he saw her. That's what I'm talking about. Vivian smiled. You said red. Ethan leaned closer. I like when you listen. Vivian's voice stayed soft. I listen to people who matter. Ethan's smirk widened. Because that sentence felt like loyalty, even though it wasn't. By Wednesday, Damian did something unexpected. He sent a car to Vivian's building. Not to pick her up, just to deliver something. A small velvet box. Vivian opened it inside her apartment. A bracelet. Diamonds. Simple. Elegant. The kind of jewelry that didn't scream, but whispered wealth. Vivian stared at it for a long moment. Then she put it on. Not because she was greedy. Because she understood what Damian was doing. Damian was marking territory. That same night, Ethan picked her up. And Ethan noticed the bracelet immediately. Not because it was flashy. Because Ethan knew diamonds. He smiled through it. But his eyes tightened. New. Vivian lifted her wrist casually. A gift. Ethan leaned in. From who? Vivian smiled gently. A friend. Ethan's smile stayed in place. But his voice dropped. A friend. Vivian nodded. Yes. Ethan held her gaze for a moment. Then leaned back and laughed softly. Not happy. Just controlled. You have expensive friends. Vivian smiled politely. I guess I do. That night, Ethan didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He didn't ask again. He just made a call. And 30 minutes later, Vivian was standing inside a private luxury boutique with Ethan beside her. No customers. No noise. Just staff waiting like Ethan owned the building. Ethan pointed at a display. Luxury watches. Ethan picked one. Heavy. Elegant. Expensive. Then he held it out. For you. Vivian blinked. Ethan. Ethan smiled. Put it on. Vivian hesitated, then held out her wrist. The staff fastened the watch beside Damian's bracelet. And when Vivian looked down, she saw it. 2 gifts. 2 men. 1 wrist. Ethan watched her face closely, waiting for guilt, waiting for panic. But Vivian's expression softened, like she was touched, like she didn't see the trap forming. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan leaned in slightly. You're welcome. By Friday, both men had done it. Both had started spending. Both had started claiming. And Vivian had become the center of a competition neither man admitted was happening. Yet, that night, Damian picked Vivian up. He noticed the watch. Damian didn't comment immediately. He waited until they were seated, until the waiter left, until the room was quiet. Then Damian asked calmly, Where did that come from? Vivian blinked. This? Damian nodded. Vivian smiled softly. A friend. Damian stared at her. A man. Vivian didn't deny it. She simply nodded. Yes. Damian leaned back slowly. His voice stayed calm, but his eyes changed. Vivian, I don't like guessing games. Vivian reached across the table and touched his hand gently. It's not a game. Damian held her gaze. Then what is it? Vivian's voice stayed soft. It's nothing. Damian stared at her fingers on his hand, then back at her face. And because Vivian looked innocent, Damian forced himself to believe her. Later that night, Damian drove her home in silence. And as Vivian stepped out of the car, Damian finally spoke. Vivian, are you lying to me? Vivian paused, turned back, smiled softly, and said, Never. Damian didn't say it out loud, but the watch bothered him. Not because it was expensive. Damian didn't care about expensive. Damian cared about access. And another man had access to Vivian. That was the problem. So Damian did what he always did when something threatened his control. He tightened the grip. Friday morning, Damian texted Vivian. Not a suggestion, a decision. Pack a bag. I'm taking you away for the weekend. Vivian stared at the message for a moment, then replied, Okay. No questions. No hesitation. And that response hit Damian in a way he didn't expect, because it felt like obedience, like trust, like she was already his. A private jet waited on the runway. Not for show, for privacy. Damian didn't like airports. He didn't like crowds. And he didn't like anyone watching what belonged to him. Vivian stepped onto the jet calmly like she'd done it before. No wide eyes. No excitement. No pretending. Damian watched her quietly. You're not impressed. Vivian smiled gently. Should I be? Damian paused, then smirked slightly. Most people are. Vivian looked out the window. Most people aren't you. Damian stared at her, because that sentence felt like respect. And Damian was addicted to respect. They arrived at a private estate outside the city. Silent. Gated. Perfect. No paparazzi. No staff walking around loudly. Just space. Vivian stepped out and looked around. She didn't scream. She didn't gasp. She just whispered. It's peaceful. Damian nodded. That's the point. That night, Damian cooked. Not because he had to. Because he wanted Vivian to see something different. Not the billionaire. The man. Vivian watched him in the kitchen, arms folded, smiling softly. You cook? Damian glanced at her. Sometimes. Vivian nodded. That's unexpectedly normal. Damian's eyes narrowed. I'm not normal. Vivian stepped closer. No. But you're trying. Damian froze. Because Damian didn't try for anyone. Not for women. Not for business. Not for friends. But for Vivian. He was. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace. Vivian curled up on the couch. Damian sat beside her. Not touching. Not rushing. Just present. The fire crackled softly. Vivian looked tired. Not glamorous tired. Real tired. Damian studied her face. What happened to you? Vivian blinked. What do you mean? Damian's voice stayed calm. You don't act like someone who grew up safe. Vivian's expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not panic. Just a tiny flicker. Then she smiled again. You asked too many questions. Damian leaned in. I'm trying to know you. Vivian looked down. Her voice became softer. Some things aren't worth knowing. Damian's jaw tightened. They are to me. Vivian looked up at him. And for a moment, she looked emotional, like she was about to say something real. Then she swallowed it back. Damian, you're too intense. Damian didn't deny it. I know. That night, Damian walked her to her room. Before she went inside, Damian spoke quietly. I don't bring women here. Vivian paused. Why did you bring me? Damian held her gaze. Because I trust you. Vivian blinked, then smiled gently. Thank you. Damian's voice dropped. Don't make me regret it. Vivian nodded. I won't. Vivian closed the door. Damian stood in the hallway for a moment, then walked away. And for the first time in years, Damian felt calm, like he had secured something. Across the city, Ethan was not calm. Ethan had been texting Vivian all day. No reply. Calling. No answer. And Ethan didn't like silence. Silence meant someone was hiding something. Ethan paced inside his penthouse like a man waiting for bad news. Then finally, Vivian replied. Just 3 words. I'm with friends. Ethan stared at the screen. His eyes narrowed. Because Vivian never said friends. She said names. She said details. She said enough to feel honest. But this was vague. And vague meant lies. Ethan typed back instantly. Which friends? No reply. 5 minutes. Nothing. 10 minutes. Nothing. Ethan's jaw clenched, and the anger inside him turned into something colder. Because Ethan didn't feel like he was losing Vivian. He felt like he was being played. Ethan grabbed his keys, walked out of his penthouse, and said one sentence into his phone. Find her. Ethan didn't hire investigators because he was paranoid. He hired them because he liked certainty. In Ethan's world, nothing stayed unknown for long. Not a competitor's weakness. Not a business partner's secrets. And definitely not the whereabouts of a woman he was spending money on. So when Vivian stopped replying, Ethan didn't beg. He didn't get emotional. He got strategic. The first thing Ethan did was drive to her building. Not to cause a scene. Not to knock on her door. Just to watch. Ethan parked across the street and sat in silence, eyes fixed on the entrance. An hour passed. Then another. No Vivian. No lights. No movement. Ethan stared at the building like it had insulted him. Because Vivian wasn't home. And she wasn't trying to hide that. She was simply gone. Ethan called her again. Straight to voicemail. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't leave a message. Messages were for men who wanted to be heard. Ethan wanted to be obeyed. So instead, he walked into the building. The receptionist looked up and froze. Because Ethan Blackwell didn't look like a man you argued with. Ethan smiled politely. Good evening. The receptionist swallowed. Good evening, sir. Ethan leaned forward slightly. I'm here for Vivian Monroe. The receptionist hesitated. She's not in. Ethan nodded slowly. I know. The receptionist blinked. Ethan's smile stayed calm. So tell me where she is. The receptionist's hands tightened on the desk. I don't know. Ethan stared at her. No shouting. No threats. Just a quiet stare. And that stare was enough. Because after a few seconds, the receptionist finally spoke. A car picked her up yesterday. Ethan's expression didn't change. What kind of car? The receptionist hesitated. Black. Luxury. Tinted windows. Ethan nodded. Driver. The receptionist shook her head. I didn't see. Ethan leaned in. Did she look nervous? The receptionist blinked. No. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Did she look excited? The receptionist swallowed. No. She looked normal. Ethan stepped back. Because that answer hit harder than anything else. Vivian wasn't being forced. Vivian was choosing. Ethan walked out of the building without another word. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, then pulled out his phone. He opened Vivian's contact and typed one sentence. Don't lie to me. Meanwhile, Damian was still at the estate. And Damian had no idea what Ethan was doing. Damian wasn't thinking about competition. Damian was thinking about commitment. That was the difference. That evening, Damian sat outside with Vivian under soft lights. The air was quiet. The estate was still. And Vivian looked peaceful. Damian watched her like she was something fragile. Something rare. Something he didn't want the world touching. Vivian turned and smiled at him. You look relaxed. Damian nodded. Because you're here. Vivian's eyes softened. Is that a good thing? Damian didn't hesitate. It's the best thing. Vivian stared at him for a moment, then looked away like the words were too heavy. Damian leaned closer. Vivian, I want you. Vivian blinked. Want me? Damian nodded. Not for weekends. Not for nights. Vivian swallowed. Damian's voice lowered. For real. Vivian held his gaze. Then she smiled softly. Okay. And Damian believed her. Because Vivian said it like she meant it. But later that night, while Damian slept, Vivian stepped quietly into the bathroom, locked the door, pulled out her phone, and stared at the messages. Damian, Ethan, both waiting, both believing. Vivian didn't look guilty. She didn't look scared. She looked calm. Then she typed a message to Ethan. I'm fine. And a message to Damian. Good night. Vivian placed the phone down, looked at herself in the mirror, and whispered softly, not yet. The next morning, Ethan's investigator called, and the first words out of his mouth were, Mr. Blackwell, I know who picked her up. Ethan answered the call immediately. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, talk. The investigator's voice was low. Careful. Mr. Blackwell, I traced the car that picked Vivian up. Ethan's eyes narrowed. And the investigator paused. It belongs to Damian Vale. For a moment, Ethan didn't react. Not because he didn't hear it, but because his brain refused to accept it. Then Ethan laughed once. A short, dry laugh. No, it doesn't. The investigator swallowed. It does. The plates are registered through one of Vale's holding companies. Ethan's smile faded. His eyes turned hard. Are you sure? Yes. Ethan sat back slowly, and something shifted inside him. Because the problem wasn't Vivian. Not yet. The real problem was Damian, his best friend. The one man Ethan trusted in a world built on lies. Ethan didn't call Damian. He didn't confront him. Not yet. Because Ethan needed to know something first. Ethan needed to know if Damian was doing this on purpose, or if Vivian had somehow fooled them both. So Ethan did what Ethan always did. He tested. That same afternoon, Ethan texted Vivian. Dinner tonight. 9 p.m. Vivian replied 5 minutes later. I can't. Ethan stared at the screen, then typed. Why? Vivian replied. Something came up. Ethan's jaw tightened. Because Vivian didn't usually say vague things to Ethan. Vivian gave Ethan answers. Small answers. But answers. This was different. This was her trying to keep him away. Ethan sent one final message. Are you with Damian? Vivian didn't reply. 10 minutes. Nothing. 20 minutes. Nothing. Ethan stared at his phone like it was insulting him. Then he stood up, walked to his bar, poured a drink, and didn't take a sip. He just held the glass like he needed something in his hand to stop himself from doing something stupid. Meanwhile, Vivian was still with Damian. Damian had extended the weekend. Not because Vivian asked, because Damian decided. And Vivian didn't resist. That was what made it feel real. Vivian sat at the breakfast table wearing one of Damian's shirts. Hair down, bare face, soft, domestic. Damian watched her like he couldn't believe she was there. You're quiet. Vivian smiled gently. I'm comfortable. Damian nodded slowly. Good. Vivian looked up. Are you always this controlling? Damian didn't flinch. Yes. Vivian laughed softly. Damian's eyes narrowed. Is that a problem? Vivian shook her head. No. Damian leaned forward slightly. Then don't fight me. Vivian's smile faded into something softer. Okay. And Damian believed her again. Because Vivian had mastered the art of sounding sincere. Later that evening, Damian took Vivian for a drive. No destination. Just roads. Just silence. Vivian rested her head against the seat. Damian glanced at her. You're not scared of me. Vivian blinked. Should I be? Damian's voice dropped. Most people are. Vivian looked at him. I don't scare easily. Damian stared at her for a moment, then nodded. I like that. Back in the city, Ethan was unraveling. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way that matters. He stopped smiling. He stopped laughing. He stopped being Ethan. And when Ethan stops being Ethan, people get hurt. Ethan called Damian that night. Damian answered calmly. Ethan. Ethan's voice was casual. Too casual. Where are you? Damian paused. Why? Ethan smiled slightly. Just checking in. Damian's tone stayed flat. I'm busy. Ethan nodded slowly. With what? Damian's voice was calm. Business. Ethan held the phone away for a second, then brought it back. You always say business when you're lying. Damian didn't respond. Ethan continued softly. Are you with her? Damian's voice stayed controlled. Who? Ethan's smile disappeared. Don't do that. Damian paused, then said, Ethan, drop it. Ethan's eyes darkened. Drop what? Damian's voice lowered. Whatever game you're playing. Ethan laughed. But it wasn't warm. A game. Damian exhaled. Good night. And Damian hung up. Ethan stared at the phone, then whispered to himself. So it's like that. That night, Ethan sent Vivian one final message. Not sweet. Not charming. Not romantic. Just 5 words. I know you're with him. Vivian saw Ethan's message the moment it came in. I know you're with him. And for the first time since the party, Vivian didn't reply immediately. She stared at the screen like she was weighing something. Not guilt. Not fear. Something else. Something closer to strategy. Then she locked her phone and walked back into the living room like nothing happened. Damian was standing by the window, looking out over the estate grounds. He looked calm, but Vivian could tell something was on his mind. Damian didn't fidget. Damian didn't pace. Damian simply got quieter. Vivian stepped up behind him. What are you thinking about? Damian didn't turn around. You. Vivian's voice stayed soft. That's a heavy thing to think about. Damian finally looked at her. His eyes were intense. I don't like sharing my time. Vivian blinked. Sharing? Damian stepped closer. Vivian, you're not seeing anyone else. It wasn't a question. Vivian held his gaze. Her expression stayed innocent. Almost surprised. No. Damian's jaw tightened. No what? Vivian spoke gently. No. I'm not seeing anyone else. Damian watched her face, looking for cracks, looking for hesitation. But Vivian didn't hesitate. Vivian didn't over-explain. She simply looked like a woman being accused of something she didn't do. And that was exactly what Damian needed. Damian exhaled slowly. Good. Vivian smiled softly. Damian, I'm not that kind of woman. Damian nodded once. And in that moment, Damian made a decision. That night, Damian flew them back to the city. Not because he had to. Because he wanted Vivian close. Because Ethan's call had bothered him more than Damian wanted to admit. Damian didn't know Ethan had Vivian's number. But Damian knew Ethan. And Damian knew the way Ethan sounded on the phone. Like a man who wanted something. Like a man who believed he deserved it. When Vivian got home, Damian walked her to her door. Vivian turned the key slowly. Damian stood behind her, silent. Then he spoke. I want you with me tomorrow. Vivian turned around. Tomorrow. Damian nodded. All day. Vivian smiled gently. Okay. Damian's eyes narrowed slightly. You say okay a lot. Vivian blinked. Is that bad? Damian stepped closer. It makes me think you're hiding something. Vivian's smile faded. She looked hurt. Not dramatic. Just disappointed. Damian, if I was hiding something, I wouldn't be standing here with you. Damian stared at her. Then his expression softened. And he believed her. Again. The moment Damian left, Vivian closed the door and leaned against it. Her phone buzzed immediately. Ethan, answer me. Vivian exhaled once. Then typed calmly. I'm not with him. Ethan replied instantly. Don't lie. Vivian typed. I'm at home. Ethan. Then prove it. Vivian paused. Then she did something smart. She sent Ethan a photo. Not of herself. Not of her face. Just a photo of her apartment floor. Her shoes near the door. The corner of her living room. A harmless picture. A picture that looked like truth. Ethan stared at it. And for a moment, his anger slowed. Because Vivian had just given him something. Evidence. And Ethan loved evidence. Ethan called her immediately. Vivian answered softly. Hi. Ethan's voice was low. Where were you? Vivian's voice stayed calm. I told you. I'm home. Ethan paused. You're avoiding me. Vivian sighed quietly. Ethan, you're intense. Ethan laughed once. I'm intense because I care. Vivian's voice softened. I know. Ethan's tone changed. Are you seeing him? Vivian didn't overreact. She didn't gasp. She didn't get offended. She simply said, Damian is my friend. Ethan froze. Friend. Vivian continued gently. He's kind to me. He's protective. But you and I are different. Ethan swallowed. Different how? Vivian's voice dropped. You make me feel alive. Silence. Ethan didn't speak. Because those words hit him like a drug. Vivian had just fed his ego perfectly. Ethan finally whispered. Come see me. Vivian hesitated. Then said softly. Tomorrow. Ethan exhaled. Promise. Vivian replied. I promise. Vivian hung up. And for the first time all week, she smiled. Not sweet. Not innocent. Not polite. Just a small, private smile. Then she walked to her bedroom and locked the door. Across the city, Damian sat in his penthouse staring at his phone. Because he had just received a message from Ethan. Only 4 words. We need to talk. Damian stared at Ethan's message for a long moment. We need to talk. In any normal friendship, that sentence would mean something simple. A business issue. A personal problem. A disagreement. But Damian and Ethan weren't normal friends. They were men who had built empires. Men who didn't ask. Men who didn't explain. So when Ethan said, "We need to talk," Damian didn't hear concern. Damian heard pressure. And Damian hated pressure. Damian didn't reply. He simply called Ethan. Ethan answered instantly. Damian. Damian's voice was calm. Now. Ethan paused. Now. Damian repeated. Now. Ethan chuckled softly. All right. Come through. 30 minutes later, Damian walked into Ethan's penthouse. No greeting. No handshake. No smile. Ethan was standing by the bar, pouring a drink. Damian didn't sit. He didn't relax. He stood like a man entering enemy territory. Ethan turned and smiled like this was casual. You look tense. Damian's eyes stayed cold. What do you want? Ethan took a slow sip, then said, I want to ask you something. Damian didn't respond. Ethan stepped closer. Are you seeing Vivian Monroe? Damian's jaw tightened. His eyes didn't move. Why? Ethan smiled. Just answer. Damian's voice stayed flat. Yes. Ethan nodded slowly. Like he expected it. Like he already knew. How long? Damian's eyes narrowed. What is this? Ethan laughed quietly. Don't act like you don't know. Damian stepped forward. Ethan, why are you asking about my woman? Ethan's smile faded slightly. Your woman? Damian didn't blink. Yes. Ethan nodded slowly, then said something Damian wasn't prepared for. Interesting. Damian's eyes hardened. What? Ethan took another sip. Because she's been seeing me too. For a moment, Damian didn't move. Not because he was shocked, but because his brain refused to accept it. Then Damian's expression changed. Not rage. Not panic. Something colder. Something sharper. Like betrayal. That's not possible. Ethan shrugged. It is. Damian stared at him. You're lying. Ethan smiled. Call her. Damian's hand tightened. You're playing a game. Ethan stepped closer. His voice dropped. Damian. I'm not playing. Damian stared at him. And for the first time in 10 years, Damian looked at Ethan like he didn't know him. Damian pulled out his phone. He called Vivian. Vivian answered on the second ring. Her voice soft. Hi. Damian's voice stayed calm. Where are you? Vivian blinked. At home. Damian's eyes narrowed. Are you alone? Vivian paused. Yes. Damian looked straight at Ethan. Who did you see tonight? Vivian hesitated. Just a fraction. Then. No one. Damian's jaw tightened. Vivian. Are you seeing Ethan Blackwell? Silence. Vivian's breathing stayed steady. Then she laughed softly. Damian, why would you even ask me that? Damian's voice stayed low. Answer me. Vivian's tone became gentle. Almost hurt. No. Damian stared at Ethan. Then back at the phone. You swear. Vivian whispered. I swear. Damian's eyes stayed locked on Ethan. Because Vivian sounded convincing. Too convincing. Damian ended the call. The room went quiet. Ethan's smile returned slowly. See. Damian's voice dropped. You're lying. Ethan shrugged. Or she's lying. Damian stepped closer. Why would she lie to me? Ethan's eyes sharpened. Because she's lying to both of us. Damian's face tightened. No. Ethan leaned in. Damian, she's been with me. She's been in my car. In my places. Wearing gifts I gave her. Damian's eyes flashed. Prove it. Ethan smiled. Gladly. Ethan walked to his desk. Pulled out his phone. Opened his camera roll. Then held it up. Damian stared. And his stomach dropped. Because there she was. Vivian. Sitting beside Ethan. Smiling softly. Wearing the watch. Wearing Damian's bracelet. In Ethan's world. Damian's face went still. Ethan watched him closely. Now tell me. Ethan said quietly. Are we going to pretend we don't see what's happening? Or are we going to handle it? Damian's voice was low. You stole her number. Ethan paused. Damian continued. You stole it from my phone. Ethan's smile faded. Because Damian was right. But Ethan didn't admit it. He simply said, I wanted her. Damian's eyes turned dangerous. She was mine first. Ethan stepped closer. She's not property. Damian's voice sharpened. Then why are you acting like she is? Ethan's jaw tightened. And suddenly, 10 years of friendship felt like it was hanging by a thread. Damian took one slow step forward. Ethan didn't step back. And Damian said the sentence that changed everything. If you ever touch her again, I will destroy you. Damian didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He didn't throw anything. He simply stood there in Ethan's penthouse and said, "If you ever touch her again, I will destroy you." And for a moment, Ethan didn't respond. Not because he was scared, because he was offended. Because Ethan Blackwell had never been threatened by anyone who mattered. Especially not Damian. Ethan's smile disappeared. His voice dropped. "You're talking like you own her." Damian's eyes stayed cold. "I'm talking like I trusted you." Ethan stepped closer. "You trusted me, but you didn't trust her." Damian's jaw tightened. "Don't twist this." Ethan laughed softly. "Not warm. Not friendly. Damian, she lied to your face. And you still believed her." Damian's expression tightened. "She's confused." Ethan's eyes sharpened. "No. She's smart." Damian didn't move. "Stop." Ethan leaned in slightly. "You're the one who should stop. Because I'm not stepping away." Damian's voice lowered. "Then you're choosing her over me." Ethan's answer came instantly. "Yes." That word hit the room like a gunshot. Not because it was loud, because it was final. Damian stared at Ethan for a long moment. 10 years. They had built everything together. They had destroyed competitors together. They had survived scandals together. And Ethan just threw it away in one word. Damian nodded slowly. "All right." Ethan smirked. "All right." Damian's voice was calm. Too calm. "If that's what you want, then you can have her." Ethan blinked. Damian continued. "But don't ever call yourself my friend again." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Damian." Damian cut him off. "We're done." Damian turned and walked out. But Ethan wasn't done. Ethan followed him to the elevator. "You're acting like a victim," Ethan said. Damian pressed the elevator button. "You stole from me." Ethan scoffed. "I stole a phone number." Damian's eyes flashed. "You stole loyalty." The elevator doors opened. Damian stepped inside. Ethan stepped in too. Damian looked at him. "Get out." Ethan didn't move. "No." The doors closed. And suddenly, they were trapped in a quiet metal box. Two billionaires. Two men who had never lost. And one woman who had just turned them into strangers. The elevator descended. Slow. Silent. Ethan finally spoke. "You know what the worst part is?" Damian didn't respond. Ethan continued. "She didn't even have to try." Damian's jaw tightened. Ethan leaned closer. "She just smiled at you, and you folded." Damian's hands clenched. "Shut up." Ethan smirked. "Make me." The elevator doors opened. And the moment they stepped into the lobby, Damian hit Ethan. Not a slap. Not a shove. A clean punch. Fast. Controlled. The kind of punch Damian had never thrown in public before. Ethan stumbled back, shocked for half a second, then smiled. Because Ethan had been waiting for Damian to lose control. Ethan wiped the corner of his mouth. "There he is." Damian stepped forward again. Ethan hit back. Harder. Wilder. They crashed into a table. People backed away. Security froze. Because nobody in that building had ever seen Damian Vale and Ethan Blackwell fight. It didn't feel real. It felt like watching the world break. Damian grabbed Ethan by the collar. Ethan shoved him. Damian slammed him into the wall. Ethan laughed through it. "She's going to choose me." Damian's eyes were dead. "She's going to choose whoever's winning." Ethan's smile faded slightly. Because Damian was right. Security finally stepped in. Not because they wanted to. Because they had to. Damian's suit was ruined. Ethan's lip was bleeding. And both men were breathing like animals. Damian straightened his jacket. His voice calm again. "Call her." Ethan wiped blood from his mouth. Gladly. Ethan pulled out his phone. He called Vivian. Vivian answered softly. "Hi." Ethan's voice was smooth again. Like he hadn't just fought. "Where are you?" Vivian blinked. "At home." Ethan smiled. "Come out." Vivian hesitated. "Ethan." Ethan's voice lowered. "Now." Vivian paused. Then. "Okay." Damian stared. Because Vivian obeyed Ethan. Not Damian. And that hurt more than the punch. Damian pulled out his phone and called Vivian too. Vivian's phone rang again instantly. And she froze. Because for the first time, both men were calling at the same time. And Vivian had to choose which one to answer. Vivian stood in her apartment staring at her phone like it was a bomb. 2 calls. Back to back. Ethan first. Then Damian. And for the first time since this started, Vivian didn't look calm. Not because she was scared. Because this was the moment she couldn't talk her way out of. Because the game wasn't private anymore. Now it was public. Now it was real. Vivian didn't answer either call. Instead, she did something smarter. She texted. To both of them. The exact same message. Stop. Please. You're scaring me. Then she placed her phone down and waited. Ethan replied instantly. Come outside. Damian replied seconds later. Are you safe? Vivian stared at the difference. And for the first time, Vivian's eyes softened. Because Damian sounded like a man who wanted to protect her. Ethan sounded like a man who wanted to claim her. Vivian grabbed her coat and stepped outside. She didn't choose Ethan's car. She didn't choose Damian's car. She walked down the sidewalk, into the open, where cameras could see, where neither man could touch her without witnesses. Vivian wasn't just classy. She was careful. 2 black luxury cars pulled up almost at the same time. Damian's on the left. Ethan's on the right. Both windows tinted. Both engines humming like predators. Vivian stood between them. And for a second, the street felt like a battlefield. Damian stepped out first. Suit wrinkled. Jaw tight. Eyes cold. Ethan stepped out next. Lips still bruised. Smile still dangerous. Vivian's heart was steady. Her face soft. Her voice gentle. What is wrong with you two? Damian stared at her. Don't act confused. Ethan laughed quietly. No, let her. She's good at that. Vivian's eyes widened slightly. Ethan. Damian stepped closer. Vivian, tell him the truth. Vivian blinked. What truth? Damian's voice dropped. That you're not with him. Ethan smirked. And tell him you're not with me. Vivian looked between them like she was seeing 2 strangers. Then she whispered, I didn't know you were friends. That line hit both men like a punch. Because it sounded believable. And the worst part? It was. Vivian had never called Damian and Ethan friends. Not once. She had always kept them separate. Damian's eyes narrowed. You didn't know? Vivian shook her head softly. Damian, you never told me. Damian froze. Because it was true. Damian never talked about Ethan. Ethan's smile faded slightly. Vivian, don't play innocent. Vivian turned to him. I am innocent. Ethan scoffed. You've been seeing both of us. Vivian's eyes filled with emotion. Not dramatic tears. Just enough shine to look real. I didn't know it was wrong. Damian's jaw tightened. How could you not know? Vivian looked down, then whispered. Because neither of you told me you were exclusive. Silence. Because that was the perfect answer. Not a lie. Not fully. Just a truth twisted in the right direction. Damian's voice lowered. Vivian, do you love him? Vivian blinked. Love. Ethan watched her closely. Vivian turned to Ethan. Ethan, I care about you. Then she turned to Damian. Damian, I care about you too. Damian's face tightened. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Vivian continued softly. But you too. You're acting like I'm a prize. Damian's voice dropped. Because you are. Ethan stepped forward. Choose. Vivian's eyes widened. No. Ethan's jaw tightened. Choose. Damian's voice was colder. Now. Vivian looked between them again. Then she took a slow breath. And she did something neither man expected. She stepped backward. Away from both cars. Away from both men. She shook her head softly. I'm going home. Damian reached out slightly. Vivian. Vivian cut him off. No. I'm done with this. Ethan laughed. You're done? Vivian looked at him. Her voice calm. Yes. Then she turned and walked back toward her building, leaving 2 billionaires standing in the street like men who had just lost control of their own lives. Damian watched her go. Ethan watched her go. And for the first time, they both realized something. They weren't competing for Vivian anymore. They were losing her. That night, Vivian locked her door. She turned off the lights. She lay in bed, and her phone buzzed once. A new message. Unknown number. 1 sentence. It's time. Vivian stared at the unknown message. It's time. No name. No emoji. No explanation. Just 2 words that felt heavier than anything Damian or Ethan had ever said to her. Vivian didn't reply. She didn't panic. She simply sat up in bed, phone in her hand, eyes fixed on the screen. Then she whispered. Finally. And that whisper would have changed everything if anyone had heard it. But no one did. The next morning, Damian woke up angry. Not loud angry. Damian didn't do loud. Damian woke up with the kind of anger that makes men cold. Because Vivian had walked away from him. And Damian wasn't used to women walking away. Especially not after he had started offering her more than money. Damian didn't call Vivian. He went to her building. Not with flowers. Not with apologies. With presents. Damian stood in the lobby like a man who expected doors to open for him. The receptionist looked up and froze. Sir, she isn't receiving visitors. Damian's voice stayed calm. Tell her I'm here. The receptionist hesitated. She said she wants space. Damian leaned in slightly. Space is for strangers. The receptionist swallowed and picked up the phone. Upstairs, Vivian's phone rang. Damian. Vivian stared at it for a second, then declined. Not dramatically, just declined. Damian's jaw tightened. Because Vivian had never declined his calls before. Damian stepped back from the desk. I'll wait. The receptionist blinked. Sir. Damian didn't respond. He sat down calmly like a man who could wait forever. Across town, Ethan was doing the opposite. Ethan didn't wait. Ethan hunted. Ethan had spent the entire night replaying that moment in the street. Vivian walking away. Vivian refusing to choose. Vivian leaving them standing there like fools. And Ethan hated one thing more than losing. Being embarrassed. Ethan called Vivian again. No answer. He texted. No reply. So Ethan did what Ethan always did when he couldn't get access. He went around. Ethan called the investigator again. I want everything. The investigator paused. Everything on her. Ethan's voice was low. Yes. Where she shops. Where she eats. Where she goes. Who she talks to. The investigator hesitated. Mr. Blackwell, that's. Ethan cut him off. Do it. By noon, the investigator called back. His voice sounded different. Not nervous. Confused. Mr. Blackwell. Vivian Monroe's background doesn't add up. Ethan sat up. Explain. The investigator paused. Her records are clean. Too clean. Like someone wiped them. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Wiped them? Yes. No old addresses. No real employment history. No long-term contacts. Ethan's jaw tightened. So who is she? The investigator hesitated. Then said, I don't know. But she's not who she claims to be. Ethan smiled slowly. Because instead of scaring him, that excited him. Back in the lobby, Damian was still waiting. Calm. Silent. A man who refused to be dismissed. Finally, the elevator doors opened. Vivian stepped out. She looked different. Not dressed for a date. Not dressed for a party. She wore a simple beige coat. Hair pulled back neatly. No jewelry. Like a woman trying to disappear. Damian stood immediately. Vivian. Vivian didn't smile. Damian. Damian's voice softened slightly. Talk to me. Vivian looked away. There's nothing to talk about. Damian stepped closer. You embarrassed me. Vivian blinked. Then looked at him. Her voice quiet. No. You embarrassed yourself. Damian froze. Because Vivian had never spoken to him like that. Not once. Damian's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Vivian stared. What? Damian's voice lowered. You walked away like you didn't care. Vivian's expression tightened. Because I don't want to be fought over. Damian leaned in. Then choose. Vivian's jaw tightened. I won't. Damian's eyes hardened. Vivian, you can't keep doing this. Vivian looked at him. And for the first time, her voice wasn't soft. It was firm. Watch me. Vivian turned to leave. Damian grabbed her wrist. Not violent, but possessive. Vivian stopped instantly. Slowly turned her head. And Damian saw something in her eyes. A warning. Vivian spoke quietly. Let go. Damian didn't. Vivian repeated it. Let go. Damian's hand loosened. Vivian walked away. And Damian stood there in silence. Feeling something he had never felt before. Fear. Not fear of Vivian. Fear of losing control. That night, Vivian left her apartment. Not for Damian. Not for Ethan. For someone else. She walked down the street without looking back. A black car pulled up. Not a luxury showpiece. Not loud. Not flashy. Just quiet. The window rolled down slightly. A man's voice spoke from the dark. Get in. Vivian didn't hesitate. She got in. And the car drove away. From across the street. Ethan was watching. And for the first time, Ethan realized Vivian wasn't choosing between him and Damian. Vivian had been choosing someone else the entire time. Ethan sat in his car across the street, staring at the taillights disappearing into the night. Vivian had gotten into a car. A different car. Not Damian's. Not Ethan's. And the worst part? She didn't hesitate. She didn't check her surroundings. She didn't act nervous. Vivian moved like she trusted whoever was inside. Like she knew him. Like she belonged with him. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Because suddenly, the story wasn't about two billionaires fighting over one woman. Suddenly, it felt like they were both late. Ethan didn't follow. Not because he couldn't. Because he didn't want Vivian to know he was watching. Ethan wanted to win. And the best way to win wasn't to chase her. It was to understand her. So he waited. He watched the street. He watched the building. And then he called his investigator. I need the car. The investigator paused. What car? Ethan's voice was calm. Too calm. The one she just got into. The next morning, Ethan had the answer. The investigator's voice was low. It's registered under a shell company. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Who owns the shell company? The investigator hesitated. That's the problem. It doesn't trace back to anything normal. Ethan smiled slowly. Good. Because normal was boring. And Ethan wasn't bored anymore. Ethan was obsessed. Damian was obsessed too. But Damian's obsession looked different. Damian wasn't stalking. Damian wasn't digging through records. Damian was tightening the walls. Because Damian's pride had been wounded. And Damian Vale didn't tolerate humiliation. Especially not from a woman. Especially not in front of Ethan. Damian invited Vivian to dinner again. Vivian said no. Damian sent flowers. Vivian returned them. Damian sent a gift. Vivian didn't accept it. And every time she refused, Damian's control slipped a little more. Then Damian did something he hadn't done in years. He called Ethan. Not to talk. To warn. Ethan answered with a smile in his voice. Damian. Damian's voice was cold. Stay away from her. Ethan laughed softly. You're still saying that. Damian's jaw tightened. This isn't a joke. Ethan's tone sharpened. Then stop acting like she's yours. Damian paused. Then said, she's not yours either. Ethan's smile faded. So you admit she's playing us? Damian didn't answer. Because Damian didn't want to admit it. Damian wanted to believe Vivian was innocent. That she was simply overwhelmed. That she didn't know what she was doing. Because if Vivian wasn't innocent, then Damian had been fooled. And Damian Vale didn't get fooled. Ethan spoke again. Let me ask you something. Damian stayed silent. Ethan's voice lowered. Did she ever tell you anything real about herself? Damian's jaw tightened. Ethan continued. Where she grew up. Her family. Her past. Damian didn't answer. Because Damian realized something. Vivian had never told him anything real. Not once. Damian had been so focused on how she made him feel. He hadn't noticed how little he actually knew. That night, Damian did what Ethan had already done. He started digging. He called his own specialist. Not an investigator. A man who didn't ask questions. A man who didn't leave paper trails. Damian gave him one name. Vivian Monroe. The specialist paused. What do you need, sir? Damian's voice was quiet. Everything. Meanwhile, Vivian was still moving. Still calm. Still elegant. Still quiet. She went to lunch alone. She walked through expensive stores without buying anything. She looked like a woman who was simply living. But Ethan was watching. Damian was watching. And neither man realized. Vivian wasn't just living. She was waiting. Then, on Friday night, Vivian finally replied to Ethan. One message. Meet me. Ethan's heart kicked. Not because he was emotional. Because he felt like he was winning. He replied instantly. Where? Vivian sent an address. No explanation. Just an address. Ethan arrived first. A private lounge. Dim lights. Empty room. He sat down, adjusting his blazer, trying to look calm. But his eyes kept flicking to the entrance. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. Vivian walked in. Elegant. Quiet. Beautiful. Ethan stood immediately. Vivian. Vivian smiled softly. Hi. Ethan stepped closer. Where have you been? Vivian tilted her head slightly. Thinking. Ethan's voice dropped. About who? Vivian smiled. About you. Ethan's smirk returned. He leaned in. So you chose. Vivian didn't answer. She simply reached into her purse and pulled out something small. A folded piece of paper. She placed it on the table. Ethan stared. What is that? Vivian's voice was soft. Read it. Ethan unfolded it. And his expression changed. Because it wasn't romantic. It wasn't a note. It was a printed screenshot. A bank record. One of Ethan's accounts. A private one. One Ethan never showed anyone. Ethan's face went cold. Where did you get this? Vivian smiled softly. Does it matter? Before Ethan could speak again, the door behind him opened, and Damian Vale walked in. The moment Damian Vale stepped into the room, the air changed. Not because he was loud. Because Damian carried pressure. The kind that makes people sit up straighter without knowing why. Ethan turned slowly. His jaw tightened. You've got to be kidding me. Damian didn't look at Ethan first. Damian looked at Vivian. And Vivian didn't look surprised. That was the part that hit hardest. She stood there calm. Elegant. Hands folded lightly in front of her. Like this was exactly how she planned it. Damian's voice was quiet. Vivian. Vivian smiled softly. Damian. Ethan laughed once. So this is what you're doing now? Setting meetings like we're your employees? Vivian blinked innocently. I didn't know you both would come. Damian's eyes narrowed. Ethan scoffed. Liar. Vivian's gaze stayed calm. Ethan, please don't talk to me like that. Damian's jaw tightened. Because Vivian was still playing the innocent card. And Damian wanted to believe it. But the room felt wrong. Damian finally looked at Ethan. You're here. Ethan held up the paper Vivian had placed on the table. Ask her why. Damian's eyes flicked to the paper. Then back to Vivian. What is this? Vivian's voice was soft. I needed to know something. Ethan's eyes flashed. About my bank account. Vivian nodded gently. Yes. Damian's face went still. Because Damian understood the weight of that. A woman like Vivian should not have access to something like that. Unless someone gave it to her. Or she took it. Damian stepped closer. Vivian, how did you get that? Vivian hesitated. Just enough to look emotional. Then she whispered. I'm scared. Ethan laughed. Oh, here we go. Vivian's eyes filled slightly. Ethan, stop. Damian's voice dropped. Answer me. Vivian swallowed. Then said. I didn't want to lie anymore. Damian stared. Ethan leaned forward. So tell him. Vivian looked at Ethan. Then looked at Damian. And she said. I didn't know you two were best friends. Damian's eyes hardened. You already said that. Vivian nodded. And it's still true. Ethan slammed the paper down. Stop pretending you're confused. You've been lying to both of us. Vivian shook her head. No. I've been surviving. Damian's eyes narrowed. Surviving what? Vivian's voice dropped. Men like you. Silence. That sentence landed. Because it wasn't a scream. It was calm. And calm is always more dangerous. Ethan stepped closer. So what is this meeting, Vivian? Vivian looked between them. Then whispered. I want out. Damian blinked. Out. Vivian nodded. I want out of this. Ethan laughed bitterly. You want out after you've taken gifts, money, time. Vivian cut him off gently. I didn't take your money. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then why do you have my account records? Vivian didn't answer. She just looked down. Damian watched her closely. Because Vivian was doing something Damian had never seen before. She was turning them against each other. Without raising her voice. Damian's voice lowered. Vivian, are you with Ethan? Vivian looked up. No. Ethan snapped. She's lying. Vivian turned to Ethan. Ethan, I never promised you anything. Ethan froze. Because that was technically true. Vivian never said, I'm yours. Ethan said that. Vivian simply let him believe it. Damian stepped closer again. Then are you with me? Vivian's lips parted. And for a moment, she looked like she might actually break. Then she whispered, I cared about you. Damian's eyes narrowed. Past tense. Vivian swallowed. Damian, you and Ethan are dangerous. Ethan laughed darkly. Now we're dangerous. Vivian nodded softly. Yes. Damian's voice was cold. You set this up. Vivian shook her head. No. Damian's eyes hardened. You wanted us in the same room. Vivian whispered. I wanted the truth. Ethan leaned in. The truth about what? Vivian slowly reached into her purse again. And this time, she pulled out something else. A second sheet of paper. She placed it on the table. Damian stared. Ethan stared. And the moment they read it, both men went quiet. Because this wasn't about Ethan's money anymore. This paper was about Damian. Damian's eyes darkened as he read the document. Then he looked up at Vivian and asked one sentence. Who are you working for? Damian's voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It didn't crack. But the moment he asked, who are you working for? Ethan stopped breathing for a second. Because that wasn't a jealous question. That wasn't a heartbreak question. That was a business question. A war question. And Damian Vale didn't ask that unless he smelled something bigger than betrayal. Vivian stared at Damian. Her face stayed soft. But her eyes changed. Just slightly. Like the innocent mask had slipped for half a second. Then she blinked. And the softness returned. Working for. Damian didn't move. Don't do that. Ethan stepped forward. Damian, what the hell are you talking about? Damian's eyes stayed on Vivian. Look at the paper. Ethan snatched it up. Read it. And his expression slowly tightened. Because the document wasn't romantic. It wasn't personal. It was financial. A private acquisition Damian had been working on. A deal that wasn't public. A deal so sensitive, even Ethan didn't know the details. And yet, Vivian had it. Printed. In her purse. Ethan's voice dropped. How do you have this? Vivian's lips parted. Damian cut her off. You don't eye anything. You don't get this by accident. Vivian swallowed. Her eyes flickered down, then back up. I didn't steal it. Ethan laughed sharply. So it magically fell into your bag? Vivian's voice trembled slightly. I was scared. Damian's jaw tightened. Of what? Vivian looked between them. Of both of you. Damian stepped closer. That's not an answer. Vivian's eyes shined like she was holding tears back. Damian, you don't understand what it's like to have powerful men pulling you in two directions. Ethan scoffed. Oh my God. Damian's eyes narrowed. Stop trying to make this emotional. It's not emotional. Vivian whispered. It is for me. Damian stared at her, then said the sentence that cut the room in half. You're not a victim. Silence. Vivian froze. Because for the first time, Damian wasn't buying it. Ethan stepped closer to Vivian. Tell us the truth. Vivian looked up at him. I have been telling the truth. Ethan's eyes hardened. No, you've been telling us what we wanted to hear. Vivian's breathing slowed. And for a moment, she looked tired. Not tired like she needed sleep. Tired like she was carrying something. Damian spoke again. Vivian, who is the man driving the car you've been getting into? Vivian blinked. What car? Ethan's head snapped toward Damian. You saw that? Damian didn't look at Ethan. Yes. Ethan's jaw clenched. So there is someone else. Vivian shook her head quickly. No. Damian stepped even closer. Stop lying. Vivian's voice rose slightly. I'm not lying. Ethan laughed bitterly. Then explain the car. Explain the bank records. Explain Damian's private deal in your purse. Vivian stared at both men. Then something in her expression shifted. Not anger. Not fear. Resignation. Like she was realizing this was the moment the game ended. Vivian's voice dropped. You two are going to ruin my life. Damian's eyes stayed cold. You ruined ours first. Vivian flinched slightly. Ethan leaned forward. Who is he? Vivian swallowed. He's nobody. Damian's voice lowered. Nobody doesn't move like that. Vivian looked down, then whispered. Please. Damian didn't blink. No. Ethan stepped back, frustrated. Damian, this is pointless. She's not going to talk. Damian's eyes stayed on Vivian. Then we'll make her. Vivian's head snapped up. Make me. Damian's voice stayed calm. Yes. Vivian's eyes widened. Because Damian didn't sound like a man in love anymore. He sounded like Damian Vale, the man people feared. Vivian took a slow step back. You can't do this. Damian stepped forward. Watch me. Ethan stared at Damian. What are you doing? Damian didn't answer. He reached for Vivian's wrist. Vivian pulled back. And for the first time, Vivian looked genuinely afraid. Not of losing them. Afraid of what they could do. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. A message. From his investigator. Ethan glanced at it. And his face changed instantly. Because the message wasn't about Vivian. It was about the unknown man. Ethan read it out loud, slowly. Mr. Blackwell, we found him. Damian's eyes snapped to Ethan. Found who? Ethan swallowed. The man she's been meeting. Damian's voice dropped. Where? Ethan stared at the message again, then looked at Vivian, and said one sentence. He's not just some guy. Vivian's breathing stopped. Ethan continued. He's been watching both of you. Damian leaned in close to Vivian and whispered. You're going to take us to him. Vivian didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at Damian like she was trying to decide which version of him she was looking at. The man who took her away for the weekend, or the man who could ruin her life with one phone call. Damian repeated it. Slower. Colder. You're going to take us to him. Vivian swallowed. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan laughed once. Not amused. Just disgusted. Vivian, stop. Vivian's eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to Damian. And for the first time, Vivian's voice cracked. Please. Damian didn't blink. No. They didn't touch her again. Not physically. They didn't need to. Because the room itself had become a cage. Damian stood in front of the exit. Ethan stood near the other door. And Vivian realized something in that moment. These weren't men you escaped by arguing. These were men you escaped by thinking. Damian spoke quietly. We're going to ask you one more time. Vivian's breathing was shallow. Damian continued. Who is he? Vivian shook her head. I can't. Ethan stepped forward. You can. You just don't want to. Vivian whispered. You don't understand. Damian's voice lowered. Then make us understand. Vivian's eyes filled again. And this time, the tears looked real. If I tell you you'll kill him. Ethan scoffed. Kill him? Vivian, we're not criminals. Vivian looked at Ethan like he was joking. You don't have to be a criminal to destroy someone. Silence. Because that was true. And Vivian knew it. Damian took out his phone. He didn't threaten. He didn't shout. He simply made a call. Vivian watched him, frozen. Damian spoke into the phone calmly. Bring the car. Vivian's eyes widened. Damian, no. Damian ended the call. Then looked at Vivian. You're coming with us. Vivian stepped back. I'm not going anywhere. Damian's voice stayed flat. You don't have a choice. Ethan watched this. And for a moment, even Ethan looked uncomfortable. Because Damian wasn't acting like a man hurt in love. Damian was acting like a man protecting his empire. The car arrived within minutes. A black SUV. No plates. No driver visible. The kind of car that didn't exist on paper. Damian opened the door. Vivian didn't move. Ethan leaned in close to her. Vivian, if you're hiding something bigger than us, tell us now. Vivian stared at him, her lips trembling. Then she whispered, I never wanted this. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then why did you do it? Vivian's voice dropped. Because I thought I could control it. Damian's eyes hardened. Get in. Vivian stepped into the SUV. Damian got in beside her. Ethan got in across from them. The door shut, and the car moved. No music. No talking. Just tension. Vivian stared out the window, trying to hold herself together. Damian watched her like a man who had stopped seeing her as a woman and started seeing her as a problem. Ethan finally broke the silence. Where are we going? Damian didn't look at him. To the address your investigator found. Ethan's jaw tightened. And what happens when we get there? Damian's voice stayed calm. We get answers. Vivian whispered. You're making a mistake. Damian turned to her slowly. The mistake was trusting you. Vivian flinched. They arrived at a private warehouse district. Quiet. Empty. No pedestrians. No lights except a few overhead street lamps. The SUV stopped. Damian stepped out first. Ethan stepped out next. Vivian stayed inside for a moment, breathing fast. Then she stepped out too, and the cold air hit her face like reality. Damian walked toward the warehouse door. No hesitation. Ethan followed. Vivian followed last. Her heels clicked on the concrete like a countdown. Damian reached the door, pulled it open, and stepped inside. Ethan followed. Vivian stepped in and froze. Because the warehouse wasn't empty. It was prepared. A table, chairs, a laptop, a projector, and a man sitting calmly in the center of it all. Like he'd been waiting. He stood up slowly. Not tall, not flashy, not dressed like a billionaire. Just calm, controlled, dangerously calm. Vivian's breathing stopped. Damian's eyes narrowed. Ethan's jaw tightened. The man smiled slightly and said, Gentlemen. The man looked directly at Damian and Ethan and said one sentence. I've been expecting you. Damian didn't respond. He didn't step back. He didn't blink. He simply stared at the man standing in front of them like he was trying to identify a threat. Ethan was the first to speak. His voice sharp. Who the hell are you? The man smiled faintly. Not cocky. Not nervous. Just calm. My name is Logan Cross. Vivian's face tightened. Like hearing the name out loud made it real. Damian's eyes narrowed. Logan Cross. Logan nodded once. Yes. Ethan stepped forward. And what are you to her? Logan glanced at Vivian. Vivian didn't speak. Logan answered for her. I'm the man she's been trying to protect. Ethan scoffed. Protect? From what? Logan's smile faded. From you. The silence that followed felt thick. Because Logan didn't sound like he was trying to impress them. He sounded like he had already measured them. Like he had already decided what they were. Damian stepped forward. You're the one behind this. Logan tilted his head slightly. Behind what? Damian's voice dropped. Vivian. The documents. The bank record. The lies. Logan's eyes stayed calm. Vivian didn't lie. Ethan laughed. Are you serious? Logan looked at Ethan. She never told you she was yours. Ethan's smile vanished. Logan continued. She never promised you loyalty. Ethan's jaw clenched. She let me believe it. Logan nodded once. Because you wanted to believe it. Damian's eyes hardened. Enough. Why are you here? Logan walked toward the table slowly, then gestured to the laptop. Sit. Damian didn't move. Ethan didn't move. Vivian stood still like she was holding her breath. Logan sighed quietly. You two are powerful men. You know how this works. You don't get answers by shouting. You get answers by listening. Damian's voice was ice. You're in no position to tell me what to do. Logan smiled faintly. That's where you're wrong. Logan clicked the laptop. The projector turned on, and a file appeared on the wall. Damian's eyes narrowed. Ethan's face tightened. Because it wasn't about Vivian. It was about them. Damian Vale. Ethan Blackwell. Side by side. A timeline. A map. Numbers. Deals. Contacts. Everything. Ethan's voice dropped. What is this? Logan's voice stayed calm. Your lives. Damian stared. How do you have this? Logan looked at Vivian. Then back at Damian. Because you gave it to us. Damian's eyes sharpened. No. Logan nodded. Yes. Ethan stepped forward, furious. You're telling me she stole from us? Logan's eyes stayed calm. I'm telling you she was allowed to. Vivian flinched slightly. Damian's jaw tightened. Allowed. Logan nodded. Because she did exactly what she was supposed to do. Damian turned sharply toward Vivian. What did you do? Vivian's voice trembled. Damian. Ethan snapped. Answer him. Vivian looked down, then whispered. I didn't want it to go this far. Logan's tone stayed even. It was always going to go this far. Vivian's eyes flashed at him. No. Logan looked at her. Vivian, stop. Damian's eyes narrowed. Because that moment was the first time Vivian looked like she had a real relationship with someone. Not Damian. Not Ethan. Logan. Ethan stepped forward. So what is this? Blackmail. Logan shook his head. No. Damian's voice dropped. Then what? Logan leaned slightly toward them. A lesson. Ethan laughed. A lesson? Logan nodded. You two live like you're untouchable. Like rules don't apply. Like people are tools. Damian's eyes hardened. You don't know me. Logan looked him in the eye. I know enough. Damian stepped forward suddenly. Where is Vivian's phone? Vivian blinked. What? Damian's voice sharpened. Give it to me. Vivian hesitated. Ethan moved toward her. Give it. Vivian slowly pulled her phone out. Damian snatched it. His specialist had already installed tracking and access tools weeks ago. Not because Damian planned this. Because Damian planned for everything. Damian opened the device logs. Scrolled. And froze. Because there it was. A hidden folder. Encrypted. A vault. Damian's eyes lifted slowly. You were in my digital vault. Vivian's face went pale. Ethan's eyes widened. What did she take from you? Damian didn't answer. Because he was still staring at the screen. His hands slowly tightening. His breathing slowing. Logan smiled faintly. Now you understand. Damian's voice came out quiet. You used her. Logan nodded. Yes. Damian's eyes darkened. And you think you'll walk away? Logan's smile faded. We already have. Ethan stepped forward, furious. Where is the data? Logan looked at him. Safe. Damian's voice dropped. Give it back. Logan shook his head once. No. Damian took a slow step forward. And for the first time, Logan stepped back. Not in fear. In calculation. Like he knew something was about to happen. Logan lifted his hand and pointed at the warehouse door. And Damian and Ethan heard it. Footsteps. Multiple. Heavy. Coming toward them. And Logan said quietly, You're not leaving here the way you came in. The footsteps outside weren't fast. They weren't chaotic. They were steady. Measured. Like whoever was coming didn't need to rush. Damian's eyes flicked toward the door. Ethan's jaw tightened. Vivian stood frozen, her hands clenched at her sides. Logan didn't look worried. That was the most disturbing part. He looked prepared. The warehouse door opened, and 3 men walked in. Not security guards. Not bodyguards in suits. These men looked like professionals. Plain clothing. No jewelry. No emotion. The kind of men who didn't ask questions. The kind of men who carried silence like a weapon. Damian's posture changed instantly. Because Damian recognized that look. These weren't hired muscle for intimidation. These were men trained for outcomes. Ethan took one slow step forward. So this is what it is. Logan's voice stayed calm. Ethan, don't make this harder than it has to be. Ethan laughed bitterly. Harder. Damian's voice dropped. Vivian. Vivian flinched at her name. Damian continued, quieter. Was any of it real? Vivian stared at him. And for a second, it looked like she might answer. Like she might say something honest. But Logan spoke first. Don't. Vivian's eyes flashed at Logan. And Damian saw it. That tiny moment. Vivian wasn't fully controlled. She was tied. And that tie was deeper than Damian and Ethan had imagined. Damian looked back at Logan. You think you're smart. Logan shook his head. No. I think you're predictable. Ethan snapped. Predictable? Logan nodded. Damian needs control. Ethan needs to win. And Vivian needed to be believed. Vivian's breathing tightened. Damian's eyes narrowed. So what do you want? Logan exhaled slowly. You two have been collecting secrets for years. People's weaknesses, people's deals, people's lives. Damian's expression didn't change. That's business. Logan's voice lowered. No, that's power. Ethan stared. So you're here to preach? Logan shook his head. I'm here to take it. One of Logan's men stepped forward and placed a small device on the table. A hard drive. Damian's eyes narrowed. What is that? Logan answered calmly. Everything Vivian took. Ethan's eyes widened. So give it back. Logan smiled faintly. Oh, I'm not giving it back. Damian's jaw tightened. Then why put it here? Logan leaned forward slightly. Because I want you to understand something. Damian stared. Logan continued. This isn't robbery. Ethan's voice dropped. Then what is it? Logan's eyes were calm. It's replacement. Damian stepped forward. You can't replace us. Logan nodded slowly. Not you personally. Damian's eyes hardened. Then what? Logan's voice was quiet. Your leverage. Silence. Because that was the thing Damian and Ethan never spoke about out loud. The leverage. The private files. The hidden deals. The secrets they kept like weapons. Logan had taken the only thing that made them truly untouchable. Ethan turned sharply to Vivian. You did this. Vivian's eyes filled again. I didn't. Ethan cut her off. Stop. Vivian flinched. Damian's voice was colder. Vivian, you were in my vault. Vivian whispered. I didn't want to. Damian stared. But you did. Vivian swallowed hard. I didn't know it would. Damian interrupted. You knew? Vivian froze. Damian stepped closer. You knew the entire time. Vivian's face cracked slightly. And for the first time, she looked less like an innocent woman, and more like a person caught between two fires. Logan stepped in. Enough. Damian's eyes snapped to him. Don't tell me enough. Logan's voice stayed calm. Damian, you don't get to control this anymore. Ethan's fists clenched. So what happens now? Logan looked at Ethan. Now you leave. Ethan laughed. And you think we'll just walk out? Logan's eyes stayed steady. Yes. Damian's voice was low. Or what? Logan nodded slightly toward the projector screen. The screen changed. A live news feed. A financial ticker. Numbers moving. Fast. Then a headline flashed. A leak. A major one. Damian's private acquisition. Exposed. Ethan's hidden partnerships. Exposed. Names. Contracts. Account trails. All of it. Public. Live. Happening right now. Ethan stared. No. Damian's face went still. Because Damian understood instantly. This wasn't a threat. It was already done. Damian grabbed the hard drive off the table. One of Logan's men stepped forward. Damian looked at him like he was nothing. Then Damian crushed the hard drive against the table. The plastic snapped. But Logan didn't react. Because Logan didn't care. Logan smiled faintly. You can break the object. Damian stared. Logan continued. You can't break what's already uploaded. Ethan's breathing became sharp. Vivian. Vivian looked at Ethan. And for the first time, she looked guilty. Not dramatic. Just real. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. Why? Vivian whispered. I didn't think you'd fall that hard. That sentence hit Ethan like humiliation. Because it wasn't hate. It wasn't revenge. It was casual. Like she had expected him to be smarter. Damian's voice dropped. So where are you going? Logan looked at Damian. Somewhere you can't follow. Damian's eyes hardened. I can follow anyone. Logan smiled faintly. No. You can follow people who want to be found. Vivian finally spoke. Her voice shaking. Damian. Ethan, please. Damian didn't look at her. Ethan did. Ethan stared at her like he didn't recognize her. You let us destroy each other. Vivian whispered. I never wanted you to fight. Ethan laughed bitterly. But you loved watching it. Vivian's eyes flashed. No. Logan stepped toward Vivian. Placed a hand gently on her back. And that touch was the clearest truth in the entire story. That was her real man. Not Damian. Not Ethan. Logan. Logan guided Vivian toward the exit. Damian moved forward. One of Logan's men stepped in front of him. Damian stopped. Not because he was scared. Because Damian realized something. If he attacked here, he'd lose more than pride. He'd lose the last pieces of his empire still standing. Ethan watched Vivian leave. And his voice came out low. So that's it. Vivian turned at the doorway. And for the first time, she looked directly at Ethan and Damian. No tears. No innocence. No softness. Just calm. Then she said one sentence. You two taught me what power really is. And she walked out. Damian's specialist called. Damian answered. The specialist's voice was shaking. Sir, it's worse than we thought. Damian's eyes narrowed. How? The specialist swallowed. They didn't just leak your deal. A pause. Then the words that made Damian's blood go cold. They leaked the file labeled Blackwell. Damian didn't speak. He just stood there with his phone pressed to his ear, eyes locked forward like he was staring through the wall. Ethan noticed the change immediately. Because Damian didn't get shaken. Damian didn't lose composure. But now, Damian looked like a man who had just been hit somewhere deeper than pride. Ethan stepped closer. What did he say? Damian didn't answer. The specialist's voice continued through the phone, panicked. Sir, it's everywhere. News outlets. Forums. Private channels. They're calling it the Blackwell File. Damian's jaw tightened. Stop it. The specialist sounded desperate. We can't. It's not one leak. It's thousands. It's been mirrored. Damian's eyes narrowed. What's inside? The specialist hesitated. Then said, everything. Damian closed his eyes for a second. Because Damian knew what everything meant. Not business deals. Not contracts. Not money. It meant the kind of things you bury so deep. You convince yourself they never happened. Ethan grabbed Damian's phone. Damian didn't stop him. Ethan listened. His face shifted slowly. From anger, to confusion, to something darker. What the hell is in that file? The specialist's voice cracked. Sir, there are photos. Audio. Transactions. Names. Ethan's breathing sharpened. Names of who? The specialist swallowed. People who disappeared. People who got ruined. People who got paid off. Ethan's hands tightened around the phone. That's impossible. Damian's voice came out quiet. No. Ethan turned sharply. What do you mean no? Damian stared at him. And for the first time in this entire story, Damian looked at Ethan with something close to disgust. Ethan, you kept secrets even from me. Ethan's face tightened. Damian, what are you saying? Damian's voice was cold. I'm saying Vivian didn't just destroy our friendship. Damian took a step closer. She destroyed your life. Ethan's jaw clenched. You think I'm scared of a headline? Damian's eyes hardened. You should be. Ethan stormed out of the warehouse. Damian followed. They got into their cars. No words. Just engines. Just fury. Ethan drove straight to his penthouse. The moment he stepped inside, his assistant was waiting. White-faced. Phone in hand. Sir, we have a problem. Ethan snatched the phone. A news anchor on the screen. A headline. A photo. Ethan's name. Then another headline. Then another. And then the worst part. A blurred image. A young man. Handcuffed. A courtroom. A timestamp from years ago. A case Ethan thought had been erased. Ethan's stomach tightened. Because he recognized it instantly. Damian arrived at his own penthouse and turned on the television. He didn't need sound. He just watched the screen. Ethan's face. Ethan's name. Ethan's history. Everything being dragged into daylight. Damian's phone buzzed. One call after another. Investors. Partners. Lawyers. People pulling away like the building was on fire. Damian ignored them. Because Damian wasn't thinking about money anymore. Damian was thinking about one thing. Vivian. Damian called his specialist again. Where is she? The specialist's voice was strained. Sir, she's gone. Damian's eyes narrowed. Gone where? The specialist hesitated. We tracked her for a few minutes. Then her signal disappeared. Like it was wiped. Damian's jaw tightened. Find her. The specialist whispered. We're trying. Ethan called Damian. Damian answered immediately. Ethan's voice was shaking with rage. You knew? Damian's voice was calm. No. Ethan snapped. You knew I had things buried. You knew there was a file. Damian's voice lowered. I knew you weren't clean. Ethan's breathing sharpened. And you still stood beside me. Damian paused. Then said quietly. That was my mistake. Silence. Ethan's voice cracked. She ruined me. Damian's voice was ice. No. Ethan froze. Damian continued. You ruined you. She just opened the door. Ethan slammed his phone down. He turned toward the window. And for the first time in his life, Ethan looked small. Not poor. Not weak. Just exposed. Because Ethan had lived his whole life believing money could erase consequences. And now he was learning something else. Consequences don't disappear. They wait. Damian stood alone in his penthouse. And for the first time, Damian didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man who had been outplayed. Damian whispered to himself. Who are you, Vivian Monroe? Then Damian's phone buzzed again. A message. Unknown number. Damian opened it. And his blood went cold. Because it wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a photo. Vivian, standing beside Logan. In an airport hangar. A private jet behind them. Vivian looking calm. Logan looking satisfied. And below the photo, 5 words. You will never find us. Damian stared at it. Ethan stared at his own collapsing world. And Vivian Monroe was already leaving. As Damian stared at the photo, another message arrived. This time, not from Vivian. From his specialist. Just one sentence. Sir, Ethan has been arrested. The news hit like a punch. Ethan Blackwell had been arrested. Not questioned. Not invited for an interview. Arrested. Handcuffed. Escorted out like he was nobody. And within minutes, every screen in the city was showing the same image. Ethan's face. Bruised. Furious. But for the first time in his life, powerless. Damian watched it from his penthouse in silence. No shock. No sympathy. Just cold understanding. Because Damian knew how fast the world turns on you when you stop being useful. Ethan wasn't a billionaire in that moment. Ethan was a headline. A scapegoat. A story the public could finally chew on. Damian's phone rang. A private number. He answered. His specialist spoke quickly. Sir, we traced the hangar in the photo. Damian's eyes narrowed. Where? Private airstrip. They left less than an hour ago. Damian's voice stayed calm. Can we intercept? The specialist hesitated. No. Damian's jaw tightened. Why? The specialist swallowed. Because the jet is registered under a government-protected shell. We can't touch it. Damian froze. Because that meant one thing. Logan Cross wasn't just some man. Logan had protection. The kind of protection money can't buy. Damian ended the call and stared out at the city lights. And for the first time, Damian understood the real twist. Vivian wasn't a random woman who played 2 billionaires for fun. Vivian wasn't greedy. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't even chasing luxury. Vivian Monroe was a weapon, and she had been aimed directly at them. Damian's phone buzzed again. A final message. Unknown number. No photo this time. Just text. Damian opened it, and his chest tightened as he read it. You were never the target. Ethan was. You were just collateral. Damian stared at the screen. Then another message came in. You two destroyed people for years. Vivian was one of them. Damian's eyes narrowed. Because that line felt too personal, too specific. Then the final message arrived. The one Damian would never forget. Her real name isn't Vivian. Damian's fingers tightened around the phone. He reread it. Slowly. Because in that moment, everything rewired. The clean background. The wiped records. The calmness. The way she moved like she'd done this before. The way she never truly belonged to either man. Damian looked back at the TV. Ethan being pushed into a vehicle. Reporters shouting. Cameras flashing. And Damian realized something else. Ethan wasn't arrested because the system suddenly found justice. Ethan was arrested because someone decided it was time. Someone with reach. Someone with patience. Someone who had been planning. Damian didn't sit down. He didn't drink. He didn't call a lawyer. He stood there, motionless, as his entire world shifted. Because this wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was war. And Damian Vale had just lost the first battle. And somewhere far away, Vivian Monroe stood inside a private jet. Long hair down, elegant coat, calm face, no tears, no guilt. Logan Cross stood beside her. He looked at her quietly. You did good. Vivian didn't smile. She just stared out the window. Then she whispered, It's not finished. Logan nodded. No, it's not. Because Ethan wasn't the end. Ethan was the beginning. And Damian? Damian was still standing. Still powerful. Still breathing. And that meant the story wasn't over. Not even close. Do you think Damian deserved what happened? Or do you think Vivian went too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss this kind of action every single week.